keep on communicating. Devin, I had that as my strapline, keep on communicating, because no business can be built on your own. You need customers, they need to be communicated with. You often need partners, whether it's employees or suppliers or, if you're in government things, you need to have people around you, and you need to have your family and friends around you as well. So if there's a simple maxim, it would be keep on communicating, because what messages you're sharing with your potential clients or existing, or your partners or your employees or with your family, it's the disalignment or the misalignment between what you're doing and what they are all expecting you to be doing that causes the conflict.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where I help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours? Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Jim James. And Jim started his journey or jumping out of airplanes at the age of 17 and figuring out that he wanted to be an entrepreneur. Went off to college at Chapel Hill. Afterwards, I think went to Singapore to start one of his first businesses. Started as an internet business, and then afterwards went to China to open up an office for a PR firm. Also got into importing some sports cars and open up a car imports business with his wife, also doing that alongside the PR firm. And then back around 2019, started the current business. Also was doing some podcasts and wrote a book or a few books and built out his business. So definitely looking forward to a great discussion. And with that much as a introduction, welcome on the podcast, Jim.
Devin, thank you so much. And, you make my life sound interesting. So thank you so much. I'm going to hire you to do some PR for me. Thank you for inviting me on the show.
Absolutely, and hey, if you do a good job of making your life interesting, I try to do my best to highlight it. So,
thanks, mate.
so absolutely. So yeah. So with that, why don't we kind of go ahead and rewind and unpack this a little bit, because I gave just the quick overview to a longer journey. But kind of walk us through a little bit of how your journey got started, jumping out of airplanes, and let's start from there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for anyone that can't tell, I'm English, and I'm here in a place just Wiltshire, which is just outside Bath, about 80 miles away from London, for anyone that's interested, because Devon's mentioned that I've lived all over the world, but I have come back now to the UK. And it was over the fields of Kent when I was 17, and it was a gusty spring morning. And there I discovered that A, I'm terrified of heights, but B, that there's more profit in taking a risk than there is getting wealthy from wages, right? So I was basically struggling to make enough money to go to Australia as a student, and I was selling soft toys, Devon, at the time by the hour. Decided I was going to have to do something a bit more radical, so I did a parachute jump. And in that 1 minute, 48 seconds, which is how long it takes you to drop 2,000 feet roughly, I discovered the power of publicity to make profits. So I managed to get to Australia, which is great. So it's kind of affirming that if I took a risk and did something for myself, I could get ahead. Went to university, as you say, in Chapel Hill, read American Studies, raised another couple of $1,000 from sorority girls in Chapel Hill because I wanted to go to Central America for an adventure. 1989 it was. Went to Nicaragua, in fact, to see the 10th anniversary of the Sandinista Revolution. To do that, I sold T-shirts on Chapel Hill in the square there, and to sororities. That was probably one of the most nerve-wracking pitches I've ever done, because you're standing in front of a whole bunch of sorority girls. I didn't try the frat boys, by the way. If it was, I thought I'd just try my charm and my English accent on the sororities. Managed to make enough money there. So when I came back to England, I did manage to work for people for about 3 years, working in variously the food industry, in advertising, and then in music and music tech. And it was really when I was working in the high tech industries that I realized that my future lay in Asia because there wasn't anybody that was helping companies that were introducing digital audio. This is back in the early 90s, Devon, when everything was still analog. There wasn't anyone helping. And so I set up a company in Singapore and sold my house, broke up with my girlfriend, gave back the car, and started a new life. So I was 27, couple of suitcases, a few £1,000, and a desire to build what did become one of the largest PR firms in Asia, or independent PR firms in Asia over the next decade. Then
Now, just a couple of curiosities. So we were rewinding just a little bit. When you were going to Chapel Hill, what did you study, or what did you initially get the degree there? Or did you
I
get a
read
degree, or did you go off and ride in the sunset doing your own business? But maybe just fill
it.
that in a little bit for us.
Yeah, I was reading American studies. So I had a 4-year degree at Manchester University with a third year in Chapel Hill. So go Tar Heels. Sorry if I've, you know, lost you a lot of audience there, Devon, but
No,
I
you're
was there
good.
during the Dean Smith days with the Dean Dome. So I read American studies and it was, one of the best years of my life. Chapel Hill was amazing. I loved it.
Awesome. No, makes sense. So you did that study, and it were there in Singapore and did a few things. And you said you went off to China and did a PR for now. What drew you to there? Was it more of a business opportunity? Was it more of a wanted to see a new part of the world? Was it somewhere in between? Maybe fill us in a little bit. How did you get it connected over to the PR firm there in China?
Yeah, so I started my company called East West Public Relations in Singapore in 95 and 2001. For any of us old enough, you remember that China entered the World Trade Organization. Seems like a long time. Well, it is a long time ago now. But I used to go to China because I had clients that really wanted to break into the China market. Singapore, is still a very small place. About 3 million people when I moved there, and very limited in terms of the size. So I went to China because clients were saying, it's the next frontier. And so I thought I either keep paying Chinese to do the work and outsourcing and lose the margin, or I go and set up my own office. So in fact, what I actually did, Devin, I went for 3 months to learn Mandarin and lived like a student. That was great fun at the age of 40. And then went back again 6 months later to open the offices of East West Public Relations. And that was flying along. So what we thought was that we would import a British sports car to China as a company car, as one does. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but in fact, there's no logic to this at all, other than the Morgan sports car brand. For anyone that's heard it or wants to go and check out Morgan sports cars, they are a beautiful British hand-built sports car, and I'd always wanted one. So we imported a Morgan sports car, and it turned out that we were the first people to ever import a Morgan sports car to China. So I rang the factory and said, this is a great car. Lots of people are asking me about it. Where would we, direct these people that want to buy one? And they said, well, we don't have an importer to China. I said, well, then I'll do it. And so we wrote the business plan, became importers of Morgan sports cars. There's kind of a lot of work to do to make it all happen. But over the space of the next 7 years, we imported 75 cars, built a brand, appointed distributors in Shanghai and Chengdu and Shenzhen, and built a whole brand. Kept the PR firm going at the same time, Devon. So I had the PR firm doing the PR for the car business. And we had so much success that the CEO of Lotus, which you'll have heard of Lotus sports cars,
Sure.
um, so they approached me and I ended up running Lotus Sports Cars as an interim CEO. So I had 3 businesses at the time, but the real benefit of being in China was I met my wife, who's a Shanghainese, who funnily had also studied at Chapel Hill. And so we met and then we started a family. So China had a lot of things going on, really. So we had the car business, the PR business. And the final thing is that anyone listening here might be familiar with the Entrepreneurs Organization. You know EO, the EO network started by Vern Harnish and Dale Michael
Mm.
Dell.
Sure.
Yep. So, a good buddy of mine, Rich Robinson, and I, we went to Dubai, and the two of us became the founder members of the Beijing chapter of EO. And so I was the founding president of EO. And that chamber or that chapter is still running strong to this day. And we started that back in 2009. So China
So
was
now, oh, go ahead.
was or just to say, China was on steroids. I mean, during we had the Olympics, of course, 2000 and was it 2008? Was it? So we just had so many amazing opportunities. It's changed, unfortunately, from where it was going. But as an entrepreneur, China was like a smorgasbord, really, Devin. There were
Mm.
so many opportunities, so many things had not been done before. And yet it was a market of 1.4 billion people speaking the same language with the same currency. So it was super, super exciting. Just to finish the story, 2019, we decided to come back to the UK to bring our daughters to school because we wanted them to get a British education. So we
Mm.
left the businesses, sold what we needed to, and returned to the UK. And now I've started the Unnoticed Entrepreneur, which is a podcast, and I have three books, one of which is
Now, just
this
before you
book, for
get too
example.
much into that,
Deal.
just so
Yeah.
it makes sense. Hey, I want to, go back to the UK, get the kids the education they think will be fitting, and will be, kind of that structure makes good sense. Now, as you're coming back from China, you've been there for a good amount of time, had, several different businesses. Sounds like, got a lot of traction and success. How did you figure out kind of as you're coming back to the UK what you were going to do? Was it simple as, hey, they let you work remotely or open up a new branch there? Or was it we're going to come back and start a brand new venture and shut all the other opportunities down? Or kind of how did you make that transition?
Yeah, and that's a really tough part of anybody's life. I mean, when you relocate and you're an entrepreneur, what do you decide to do? And actually, what I decided to do, Devin, was to reinvent myself. I was 50, 52, and I've been away for 25 years. What I decided, Devin, was that I didn't want to be the Asia guy. I didn't want to
Mm.
live in the past. It was very tempting to do that because my networks and so on were there, but I didn't want to be always up at dawn talking to people in Asia, and I didn't want to be trying to fly out to Asia every 3 to 6 months to stay up to speed. So I took the decision to sell the business in Singapore and to reinvent myself. It was not an easy decision at my age to do that, to be honest. But I also thought I need to do that as soon as I can, rather than wait and then kind of see this half-life of knowledge where you become less and less connected to Asia and less valuable. So what I
Mm.
decided to do was to um, get involved in a new industry, which is podcasting,
Mm.
and to really focus in on content and podcasting and to become the champion of the unnoticed entrepreneur because I'd spent
Now, and
years.
what drew you into it? It makes sense now. What drew you in, or how did you land on, or what made you decide to go in the podcasting route?
Because as a medium, podcasting enables us to share knowledge so easily. And as you've done with yours, I mean, you've got an amazing roster of guests and events, right? They've got on.
Mm.
So podcasting is a low cost but high connectivity medium, right? You're self-publishing, you get great connections, great conversations with people. And also we had lockdown, right? We had COVID. So for 2 years,
Mm.
we were not supposed to meet anybody. And yet podcasting was a great way to connect with people and to share with people what I knew rather than writing articles and writing blogs. But also from an entrepreneurial point of view, Devin, the internet has been great. That was one big ride. And I had an internet business in Singapore for a while that I raised money for. But podcasting is a growth medium. It's a growth business opportunity, right? And so I also saw it just from an entrepreneur's perspective, then it's a medium that has got opportunities to create businesses from. So that was the other reason.
That makes sense. So now you say, hey, don't want to just be the Asian guy, wanted, or kind of, it sounds like, kind of try something else new and go down a different path. Now, as you're going down that, always easier said than done, right? In other words, especially if you've had previous success, now it can be a good foundation for building a new business and, knowing a lot of the good practices. But on the other hand, sometimes it also gives you I'll say, false sense of security or self-esteem. Not to say it can't be earned. But on the other hand, or at least for me, I'll talk for, from my own experience, not anybody else's. You go down that route, and sometimes it's just, hey, I thought, I had success with this business means I'm going to have success with every business, and you forget how hard it is to start something out, how to get it going, how to find customers, how to get clients, how to get income, how to deal with all of the some of the different headaches and deal with all of those things that you figure out every time you start a new business. So kind of as you went down that route and said, okay, we're going to go into podcasting, do some of these new activities, kind of start something new. How did it go? Was it a hey, no issues, rocket ship to the top, money raining down from the sky, teetering on the verge of bankruptcy and never knowing where the next paycheck's coming from, or somewhere in the middle? Kind of fill us in as you made that transition and came back to the UK, how it went for you.
It's been hard. It's been really hard because, as you say, every business has a different business model. Everybody else's business looks better than your own until you realize that every business has its own different challenges, right? Every business. And so one has to learn a different set of skills. And of course, businesses and marketplaces are not static either, right? I mean, you're trying to hit a moving target. You're trying to get the right product into a moving a moving market. So the answer is it's still a work in progress, Devin, right? It's still a work in progress. But what I did was to dedicate myself to learning the skills, to becoming a master. So like you, I've done, hundreds, 800 episodes. I spent time learning about lighting, microphones, the tech. So really making sure that I was a subject matter expert, even though I wasn't necessarily making money becoming a subject matter expert, but I knew that to get to the other side, I'd have to do that. So
And
the
I
answer
like
is,
just as a side note, and
yep,
I'll definitely let you go in. What was interesting is you made the comment just in the, you mentioned, hey, got to figure out the microphone, the lighting, and the backgrounds, everything else. And, we chatted just very briefly before we started this episode just on, hey, like, you paid the compliment, true or not, and earned or not, of, hey, like the background, like the
yeah, no, it's
setup, and
very
kind of
cool.
what I
It's
have
very cool.
going.
Yeah,
And it's interesting. There's been a number of iterations figuring things out, trying it. Not everybody would say, "Hey, that's the background for me," but at least something that's interesting. I'll say entertaining or at least eye-catching or kind of different, sets you apart. And yet,
yep.
there's a lot of work that goes into that. And so, just as that as an example, it's one where you kind of take it for granted when you see it, when you just join someone with the meeting, but there's a lot of those things in the background that you have to figure out. So I like that you hit on that. There's a lot of effort that oftentimes goes into becoming that subject matter expert that people don't appreciate until you get into it.
Yeah, and then for those people that are listening, you may not know, but Devin, for example, has got an M behind his shoulder, right? Then he's got the scales of justice behind him, and he's got a revolving slideshow of images that are all related to the subject matter. He's got a QRC saying schedule a free consult. He's got his hats there, and he's got some books that shows he's an authority. And you know, that's the kind of thing that we look for in being a great host and a great guest. So
Hmm.
to your point, when you make a decision to reinvent yourself, you also have to reskill yourself, right? You can't just reinvent yourself without learning new things. And that comes with a challenge when you're a bit older, but also when you have a family to feed,
Yeah.
because you're also, dealing with the financial aspects of not earning. If I just got a job or if I had carried on doing public relations in Asia, right, short term, we would be fine. But what I could also see was that the half life of that would not be great because I'd get less and less interested, less and less relevant. And so in the short term, I might do fine, but I decided to take the pain early and hard. And then what's just happened actually, Devin, is that then I wrote my first book and I was a finalist in a book competition. So then I got a three-book deal with Wiley, the publishers. And then I got sponsored by a big software company, and I've just signed a deal to do a trial with one of the largest banks in the UK to produce podcasts for the bank. So it
Mhm.
it is a case that luck comes to those people that work hard, right? You just have to every day, well, in my experience, keep, keep going. Even if you can't see the final destination, you just have to keep going. And I think that for me anyway, I'm 57 now, Devon, so I'm at the older side. Um,
Mm.
Recognizing that we're not as quick as we used to be, recognizing that we need breaks, being patient with myself. That's sometimes hard, thinking I take a lot longer to figure things out than I ever used to. That's hard to recognize and reconcile. But what I will say is that as an entrepreneur, especially as we get older, doing something that we are interested in is the greatest source of motivation. Because, you've run lots of businesses, there's nothing worse than running a business that you're not passionate about,
Yeah,
right?
no, I definitely agree. So now as we've fun conversation got a bit aside and wanted to just circle back before we wrap up with the same two questions. But we're kind of now with the business, are going down that route, taking the opportunity, taking the risk. Where are things at today? So maybe just catch us up a little bit as to kind of where things are at today with the business and where they're headed.
Yeah, so long term, the plan is to get the podcast into the top 1% of shows worldwide so that it's commercially viable, right? It's in the top 2% now worldwide. So,
Mm.
and I'm in the top 100 globally for entrepreneur shows. So I'm on the trajectory that I want to get to, and focusing in on that. So with the deal that I've just got with a financial institution, that takes us possibly into the next realm, really, which is to have really sort of a proper commercial relationship with a large
Mm.
institution. Because what that will do, Devon, for me is from an organizational point of view, is it mean I can invest in support, infrastructure, brand building, and so on. Because, when you build a business at the beginning, you kind of do it all yourself. You figure out what works, what doesn't, and you outsource some stuff, but you kind of need to do it all yourself, I think, at the beginning, because then you can see what really, really is important and what isn't as important and what the customers are going to say. So the trajectory now really is to keep pushing so the show gets to be in the top 1% worldwide and then is commercially viable. And then I can do more global distribution and
Mm.
global distribution deals. Um, so that's really the trajectory to make this into a brand, the unnoticed entrepreneur, that people recognize. And because ultimately that's my best source of income, right? To have a recognized brand that
Mm.
brings me business, whether that's presenting or the courses that I've been building, for example, to help people to do well on podcasts. Um, Building the brand to be recognized, and then the opportunities will flow from that, Devon. That's the hope.
No, I think it sounds like a great trajectory. And I like just circling back to one thing you had hit on that I thought was a great note, and probably almost said it in passing, which is, I think when you get into a business, you don't have to do every job, but I think there's a great degree of benefit from the sense that as you do those jobs, even if you're not perfect, even if there are people that are probably more skilled at it, and at some point as the business evolves, you bring on those people having an understanding and idea of how things work, what's involved, what it takes, what type of tasks need to be done, getting all of that kind of at least base level of understanding. And then as things may evolve, as you may bring people on, or as things, may shift, you can always, step back from part of those roles or focus on where you provide the most value or where you have the most enjoyment. But kind of having that base foundation understanding is really hard to replace if you don't do that on the front end. So I think that was a great one, as well as kind of catching where things are at today. So definitely a great walkthrough all around.
Thank you.
Well, as we've reached the present day of the journey and even hearing kind of a little bit as to where you're headed, Great time to transition to the two questions I always like to ask at the end of each episode. So we're going to jump to those now. So the first question I like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What'd you learn from it?
Okay, the worst decision is to be polygamous, right? And I don't mean in a marital sense, but to be polygamous to try and run more than one business at a time.
Hmm.
So I had my PR business and I raised money for an internet business. And my old Chinese accountant said to me, Jim, it's better to have one company run well than two companies run badly. And of course, I felt that didn't apply to me, Devon. So I started two. And of course, they both suffered. And there are lots of people who say, oh, look, Elon Musk has got more than one company. The thing is, what could that business be like if they were focused on it? Right.
Hmm.
And so there's a real opportunity cost, just in the same way if you have a relationship with two partners, if you're married to a man or a woman, if you have two husbands or two wives, you can't focus on either of them 100%. So that would be the worst decision I took, was to try and run two businesses when I was mission critical to them both. That's different to being a shareholder or a chairman and having people run your businesses. That's a different thing. But if you're mission critical to both businesses, that'd be the first thing. Um, and sorry, what was the second question?
Yeah, we haven't got to the second question, but we'll
Oh,
get there now.
okay.
And I do like, that one's always hard. As an entrepreneur, I think generally you enjoy doing multiple things or having multiple areas where you can engage with. So, there's I think that natural tendency to, oh, I can be the exception, or I can run multiple things, or I can do that. And I think that there's ways that you can long-term structure that, set it up, and maybe have that success. But definitely, as you get started, as you're getting going, as you pursue and explore that, it's really hard to have that bandwidth and make that a success, and focusing on the not doing just, multiple things, but focusing on the way you can, or doing a successful business first and getting that structure and that foundation sound, I think makes a huge difference. So easy mistake to make, I think, with a lot of entrepreneurs, but also a great one to learn from. Now the second question you mentioned, which is, so now if you were to be talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one rule of thumb you'd recommend?
Keep on communicating. Devin, I had that as my strapline, keep on communicating, because no business can be built on your own. You need customers, they need to be communicated with. You often need partners, whether it's employees or suppliers, or if you're in government things, you need to have people around you, and you need to have your family and friends around you as well. So if there's a simple maxim, it would be keep on communicating, because what messages you're sharing with your potential clients or existing, or your partners or your employees or with your family, it's the disalignment or the misalignment between what you're doing and what they are all expecting you to be doing that causes
Mm,
the conflict, right? Whether it's a customer who says, well, you didn't deliver what I understood you were going to deliver, or it's a wife who says, you're not home when you said you were going to be home, or it's a kid who says, Dad, you're not there when I thought you were going to be, or it's a member of staff who says, I don't know what I'm supposed to do because you haven't really told me.
mm,
So, and having worked, especially in Asian countries, I've run businesses in Singapore, China, and India. So I've run mixed culture teams as well.
mhm.
You really can't over communicate. You really do need to share what you're thinking and planning for other people around you to make the adjustments necessary for you to succeed and for them to accommodate your success or your failure. So very simply, Devin, I would say of all the things, as an essential sort of ingredient success, is keep on communicating.
No, I think that is definitely a great rule of thumb and a great takeaway, and certainly is a good one to keep in mind as you're getting the business going, and really at all stages of the business. So perfect. Well, now as we do wrap towards the end of the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Great, Devin. Well, it's jimajames.com. I have my own website, and there's a gift there as well. So if you go to jimajames.com, you'll see in the menu bar actually a little icon for a gift as well. And if they click that, it'll take you to a page, and I have a free download for a 10-point checklist for anyone that's going to be a podcast guest because I have a course there. So jimajames.com, that's the easiest place because that'll take you to everything else that I'm doing. And I'd love to hear from anyone that's been listening to our podcast today and see if I can help them with anything that they've got on their minds.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, expand their network, support a great business. There's nothing else that make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you, their listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share, we'd love to have you on the podcast. So just feel free to go to inventiveunicorn.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And along that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks, Devin. Thank you so much for having me.